Hey, Julie, come on up.
Well, good morning. It's an honor to be here. And I have a heightened appreciation for the opportunity to speak in a setting where I don't believe my mic will be turned off.
Hello, who's ready to be snarky today? Happy Banned Books Week to everybody, including the fascists. May you have the Banned Books Week that you deserve. Banned Books Week runs from October 1st to October 7th. I'm going to try to get this up immediately while it's still Banned Books Week. Last night, thanks to Carmen over at Homes and Textiles, I was able to go to a Banned Books event here in Tampa where I read from, where is she? This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. And Carmen, thank you so much for putting together the event. Thank you to Shuffle for hosting. Thank you to everybody who came out. So I want to talk about banned books, and I have a few, not just this one, which was banned in all the middle schools in my county, Hillsborough County, Florida, thanks to person who we're going to talk about today. Hi, Julie. This is Julie Gebhards. Julie Gebhards loves book banning. She loves it. And I thought, I really need to do some Banned Books Week content. And then this week got away from me because my youngest got very sick very suddenly and has remained sick all week. None of the rest of us have gotten it. I don't know what's going on there, but my husband is home, so I can finally film, and he's downstairs with our youngest. So today, we're going to talk about banned books and book banners. So I thought, man, it's the end of the week of Banned Books Week. I went to one event. I barely talked about any of the content, but I talk about banned books all year long, so, you know, I make up for it. I also show up at the school board when I can. Unlike some people, I have kids I have to pick up at 3:15, which makes it almost impossible for me to go to the school board and speak. Last time, didn't get there in time, even though I signed up online. So that seems fair to the parents of school-age children? Sure. You know who's always there? Julie Gebhards, typically complaining about Ellen Hopkins books.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Gebhards, and I have a question for you. What makes a book appropriate for school, and how does one attribute value to a book? Because I repeatedly hear you say things like kids need to see themselves in books. Does this mean that all books that children can see themselves in are good? So I have a book here called Burned by Ellen Hopkins, and last I checked there were 36 copies available to Hillsborough County students. And I did read the whole book. The book, first of all, denigrates a religion that many of your students adhere to, Mormonism. I've never met a Mormon who behaves in the awful way that the Mormons in this book behave. Patton, the main character, protagonist, has a tragic story. She grew up in a horrible Mormon family. She was mistreated and abused, kicked out of her home. She found freedom and a boyfriend in a new town, living with her aunt at a new school. And she gets pregnant. Rumors fly about her pregnancy at school, so she and her boyfriend flee. They get into a car accident. She wakes up in the hospital to the awful news that her baby and her boyfriend are dead. She's angry at all the people who have wittingly or unwittingly contributed to her misery. And you feel it with her. You're rooting for her through the whole story. What's next? Brace yourself. Patton plans her killing spree to get revenge on all of the people who hurt her along the way. And this is not far-fetched because she was frequently at the gun range shooting with her dad. Page 258. And so they should die too. All of them. Dad, Bishop Crandall, Trevor, Becca, Emily. With the pull of a 10mm hair trigger, their lives will end at sacrament meeting. What a lovely irony. And when I finish there, I'll hide in the desert, reload, and go in search of Carmen and Tiffany, who started the rumors, and Derek, just because. I'm sitting on the hard cement railing of a freeway overpass, legs dangling. I watch the unrelenting motion of normal people in the daily transit. Brain racing, I struggle to reach a decision. She's deciding between suicide and her murder spree. The end.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Let me give you some backstory. Julie Gebhards is a Christo-fascist, and she doesn't see it that way. I don't care. She isn't very logical. One time, after all the shit happened back in March, her friend, Kelly, who both of them bitch and moan about books that they don't like and that they typically don't read. Congrats, by the way, to Julie, who finally read one of the books she complained about. She mentioned it at the school board meeting back in June.
So I have a book here called Burned by Ellen Hopkins, and last I checked, there were 36 copies available to Hillsborough County students. And I did read the whole book.
We all finally gave her so much shit, she actually started reading the book she was complaining about. Bravo! Great job. Finally. Now how's your comprehension? So the funny thing is that back in March when all this shit was happening with This Book is Gay, I was loudly telling Julie how fucking shitty she was, which I stand by. And then I got a message from this woman, Kelly, and she was like, oh my god, I'm so super interested in your take. Would you want to meet for coffee? And she didn't, mention the fact that, first of all, she and Julie are friends, and she definitely didn't mention the fact that she is book banning and was not interested in hearing my perspective. She already heard my perspective. We were at the same school board meeting. She was the one who held up faces of kids who were missing. Assumedly, she did not get the consent of their parents to hold up their pictures, and made the case that this book is gay was going to be responsible for more trafficked kids.
My name is Kelly, and I'm mother of 4 children in the Hillsborough County Public Schools, and I exhort you to remove this book. This book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Tampa is the #1 ranked city in the country for sex trafficking, and the average age for a child to be first sex trafficked is ages 12 to 14, which is the age of these middle school students at Pierce, which contains the book. And I think it's unconscionable that you as a board would condone this book and allow it to be in our libraries when it has step-by-step instructions for downloading and using a sex hookup app. These are the teenagers just since March 1st who've disappeared in our county. These are children who've been lured away from their homes.
So I don't really think she was actually interested in my perspective. But trying to lure me out of my home under false pretenses is an interesting thing to do for a Christian. And by interesting, I mean it's pretty typical fundy bullshit. Was a little scary, I'm not gonna lie. Super glad that I have pepper spray. And also I live in a place where they can't get to me. Tax dollars don't work for everything, huh? Today, I'm gonna watch some of Julie's content. Julie's best friend Kelly blocked me after I called her out for trying to lure me out of my house. But Julie hasn't, so I can still watch her content and react to it because Julie's been making Banned Books Week content. How great! I'm so excited about this. So let's watch and react to a fascist Banned Books Week content, shall we?
Hi. Before I start, this is editing Rachel, obviously. Julie has this really interesting quirk about her where she decides that words have different definitions than they actually have, which just further goes to show how very similar Julie and my mother are. I've joked about the time that I once asked my mom, who had me in fundamentalist Christo-fascist schools that teach you anti-communist actual propaganda. And I one time asked my mom, what is communism as an adult now? And she said, well, communism to me, and I said, I'm going to stop you right there. Communism has a definition. So until we can agree that words mean things, we're always going to have problems. And the problem is that Julie and I don't agree that words have definitions. Julie makes up her own definition based on what's convenient. So before we continue, I just want to note that I am not being hyperbolic when I call her a fascist. I'm being quite literal. Fascism, I have pulled it up here from Merriam-Webster. It says a political philosophy, movement, or regime such as that of the fascisti that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. So when I call her a fascist, I'm specifically calling her a Christo-fascist. And let's look up Christo-fascist real quick. So Christian fascism is a term which is used to describe a far-right political ideology that denotes an intersection between fascism and Christianity. It's referred to as Christo-fascism, and what they believe is something that has a long history in the United States, going back to the 1950s and the 1980s with the moral majority, and it mostly centers around wanting to use the government to dictate that everybody live by Christian rule, and that is in fact what Julie is doing. So Christo-fascism. Okay, every day we learn new things. Yay!
Good afternoon. Well, once again, it's Banned Books Week in America. So guess what that means? That means the American Library Association, the NEA, the teachers unions, once again, they're pushing propaganda. Today's item of propaganda is this. Those far right-wing conservatives are targeting Black authors and LGBT content. That is propaganda at its finest. Because how many parents have you heard go into a school board meeting and say this? I don't want my child reading Black authors. Never. We're not targeting any specific authors unless they're promoting hypersexualized content in our school libraries.
I'm going to stop her there.
Content in particular,
I
unless it is...
That is categorically false. So she's like the top book banner in the county. She calls herself a professional school board speaker, and she's a professional school board speaker in the way that my 4-year-old is a professional Sonic the Hedgehog cosplayer. So, you know, so that's just categorically false. I love that she calls it Week of Propaganda, but doesn't actually have any statistics to share. So let me show you some books that I own that are banned. First of all, my kids own a shit ton of books. We have everything from like Hey Gabby, this is not banned. Listening to My Body, I wouldn't be surprised if that's banned. Hey Gabby again. 10 Spooky Spiders, it's great. It's a touch and feel book. This one is really cute. It's The Best Diwali Ever, which has been really helpful for me teaching my kids about Diwali. And then of course the old staple, Bluey. Am I right? This is the cutest episode of Bluey, by the way. Like, we're not gonna debate about this. This is the ultimate best episode of Bluey, and it's in book form. Thank you, Scholastic Book Fair. I also got the Scholastic Book Fair copy of The Best Diwali Ever. So, oh, this was one of my favorite board books when the kids were really little. So this is Princess Bride counting story. So it's like 7 men, 10 kisses. It's really cute. It's the gateway into watching Princess Bride when they're older, and then, you know, reading the book, and then ignoring the Buttercup's baby thing. We're gonna ignore that. Okay, so let's talk about banned books. So All Are Welcome Here is a book that has been banned. Alexa, where has All Are Welcome Here been banned?
It has been banned in Panama City, Florida by the school district superintendent.
Yeah. All Are Welcome Here does not have any sexual content in it. So I'm confused. What it does have is children of all races, disabled kids. I think it might have a family that has like 2 moms in it or something. Nope, 2 dads. So I'm just wondering where the sexual content is, because I've read this book to my kids a million times and I have never seen any sexual content. So if you're only banning books with sexual content in them, then why did this get banned or challenged? Is there a surprise penis I missed? Is the word clit in here somewhere? Did that just make you cringe? Another one that we love, ABCs of Black History, the Dust Jacket Got Torn. This is one of my personal favorites because it references my hero, Angela Yvonne Davis. So this was found out to have been challenged along with, you know, The Hill We Climb. So I'm just wondering, what is the sexual content in ABCs of Black History? Which does reference both blackness and queerness. Where's the sexual content? Okay. Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo. This is about bunnies, 2 boy bunnies who fall in love. Now, I know we make jokes about rabbits, but there is no, you know, rabbiting in here. Where is the sexual content? Why did this get banned and challenged? Now, technically, this didn't get banned and challenged by schools. What happened was, y'all have made a climate where it is impossible for people to even talk about racism, that her own publisher asked her to remove the theme of racism from this book. This is set in a Japanese internment camp, and the publisher asked her to remove the racist theme. I just want to point out to you that I am anti-book banning. So while I could do malicious compliance, right? You guys have decided that you're gonna muddy the waters about terms like pornography, consent. Yeah, by the way, Julie says this about consent.
Gebhards, and I'm just going to revisit the sex ed curriculum for 7th graders. And this curriculum, 5 of the board members here voted for this curriculum after a challenge with almost 2,700 petitioners objecting to the content, after my warnings at multiple board meetings, and after a public hearing where many constituents also shared many concerns about that curriculum. So once again, 5 of the board members here voted for that curriculum. My primary concern, aside from facilitating co-ed conversations about sex with 7th graders, is the problem of teaching consent to 11 and 12-year-olds. First problem is that it removes parents from the discussion that is happening in school. Children are called dependents for a reason. These are life-altering decisions that they're considering making, and parents should be a part of that. Another reason is that it teaches them a set of moral standards. Again, I'm talking about the problem of teaching consent to 11 and 12-year-olds. It teaches them a set of moral standards, including that there are essentially 2 things needed before sex: consent and condoms. That's it. That is this flies in the face of what many parents are teaching their children, that there's more moral guidelines than just consent and condoms. Another reason is that consent is an adult issue, not an 11 and 12-year-old issue. Anyone who suggests that teaching consent to an average classroom of 11 and 12-year-olds has failed their responsibility as an adult or is morally deficient. There are scenarios when 11-year-olds need to be taught about appropriate moral boundaries, but this is a very different discussion. This is not a consent discussion. The language of consent opens up a slippery slope that leads to pedophilia. In fact, the amaze.org video that was shown to every 7th grader in this county flung wide the door open to pedophilia. The video is called Understanding Sexual Consent in the Law. I've talked to you about it many times before. It shows a child consenting to sex with an adult. Then it warns the child about mandated reporters who would be forced to report their situation to authorities should the child decide to talk to those certain mandated reporters about it. This is a huge problem. There is no condemnation of that child consenting to sex with an adult. There's no condemnation of the adult having sex with the child. The video shows this clearly. Again, after warning about this video in particular, and please do look it up, amaze.org, Understanding Sexual Consent and the Law, 5 of the board members here voted to keep this curriculum. Thank you.
Over to the studio for a new tattoo. I'd like to get a large flying dragon with flames coming out of its mouth around a heart-shaped... What? Oh. Yes, sure I am. I'm 24? Yes, it's me again. Sure, I'll call back in a few years. The age of consent is the legal age at which a person is considered old enough to be able to consent to engaging in sexual activity. In the United States, the age of consent varies from state to state. In some states, the age of consent is 16. While in others, it is 17 or 18. If an adult or someone over the age of consent engages in sexual activity with someone under the age of consent, no matter the gender of either person, it is considered statutory rape. The adult may be charged with the crime even if the younger person consented to sexual contact. Some, but not all states, have Romeo and Juliet laws that recognize sex between two consenting young people who are close in age that may not be statutory rape. Ask if your state has a Romeo and Juliet law. The age of consent laws are not meant to hurt young people, but to protect them from adults who may try to take advantage of someone younger than they are. This is important to understand, so if you're under the age of consent and engaging in sexual activity, please don't hesitate to talk with a trusted adult, or to visit a family planning clinic to get birth control and condoms, or to test for an STI. Just call the clinic and ask if they're offering confidential services for minors. It's also important to know that most states have laws that require certain adults to report suspected child abuse, including statutory rape. These people are called mandated reporters. Mandated reporters vary from state to state, but usually include social workers, guidance counselors, teachers, healthcare professionals, childcare providers, law enforcement, and mental health professionals. If you choose to speak with one of these professionals, understand that they may have to report the case to family services. It is important to understand the laws in your state. Spend some time searching the internet for the term age of consent in my state. Learning about your state laws can help keep you safe.
So I decided to put that clip in here, the video that she was referring to, and then I also showed it to my husband and asked, what issues do you have with this video, if any? And he said that some of the imagery was weird, like specifically the old lady, but the imagery probably appeals to kids. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of like how Captain Underpants is weird to us, but it appeals to kids. Another example is I wasn't allowed to grow up watching the Powerpuff Girls, and now I think that imagery is like weird, but kids like it. So that really comes with like my own biases as an adult. Further, Julie's issue with it is that it doesn't demonize having a minor having sex with an adult. Obviously, we all agree that a minor having sex with an adult is a terrible fucking idea. The problem is that her idea for how to combat this is prevention by demonization of it. That doesn't work. And the thing is that kids unfortunately do get themselves in situations where they are preyed upon by adults. I shouldn't say get themselves in situations. End up in situations is a better way to phrase it, where they're preyed upon by adults. And I'm very familiar with this. And the problem is that when we are talking to a group full of kids, there is likely already a kid who is in that position. And if we're saying, don't do this, it's bad, then you are telling that kid that they should be ashamed of a situation they are already in and leaving them with zero options as to what to do to help themselves. You're not telling them to go tell a trusted adult, a mandated reporter, and what will likely happen, because we do need to give them the facts about what's going to happen without shaming them. We need to ease them into how to get themselves out of that very troubling troublesome situation. The fact is that we're not always going to prevent it, and that's hugely upsetting. We have to also be there and not leave behind the kids who are already in that position. And her position that she takes on this completely erases those kids, and obviously she just doesn't give a shit about them.
You guys have decided to muddy the waters about what terms actually mean. And I could use that muddying of the waters, that vagueness in the law, to do malicious compliance. So I could attempt, in order to point out your blatant double standard, attempt to get things like Song of Solomon in the Bible banned, other parts of the Bible banned, like Lot's daughters raping their drunk father. Let's see. I don't know. There's so many other cases of rape in the Bible, I just don't even know where to begin. I mean, isn't Mary herself like 14 years old? They don't really teach us that in Christian school. I wonder why. The point is, I could do malicious compliance, right? Francine Rivers, Redeeming Love. This is in Julie's daughter's high school. Incest, rape, child sexual assault, child trafficking of an 8-year-old. I could do malicious compliance. Go complain about this even though my kids don't attend Julie's kids' school, and vice versa. I could do that. I won't, because I am so staunchly anti-book banning. In fact, even the term book banning, they have decided does not mean what it means anymore. They think that book banning is only when the book is completely removed from everywhere. That's not what book banning is. That's not even the definition of book banning. So I don't even ban books from my own house. Like As You Grow by Kirk Cameron. I bought this with my own fucking money. I can't stand Kirk Cameron. I can't stand the ideology he believes in. I think the back of this book is Christo-fascist, horrendous bullshit. Yet it's in my house and my kids can read it. It's in the same stack as the rest of their books, with Love in the Library, ABCs of Black History, Marlon Bundo, and Little Blue Truck. This is because I can have a conversation with my kids. We can talk about what I think, what they think, what other adults think, and then they can choose to make decisions using critical thinking and all of the evidence presented to them to make smart choices. That doesn't happen when we ban books. So honestly, you're lucky that I don't do malicious compliance, because if I were a bigger bitch, and I could be, I would be removing all kinds of fucking books just to prove a point that you have double standards. Let's continue with her nonsense.
It is hypersexualized content, maybe instructing on how to perform certain sex acts and things like that. That's what
hypersexual acts, like in Francine Rivers' book Redeeming Love. Hypersexual acts like those described in great detail in Song of Solomon. Okay, just so we're clear. Not the ones that are in the ABCs of Black History though, right? Because there isn't any. Are we clear on that?
we're targeting. We're targeting books that contain BDSM. And even actually, let's just add on in there, suicidal ideation, glorifying bulimia and self-harm, things like that. That's also...
Why was Leah Johnson's book, You Should See Me in a Crown, targeted then? Again, all are welcome here. Why did that get challenged? What's going on? Are you just speaking for what you're doing in Hillsborough County? Because you are affiliated with Moms for Liberty, right? You are. So who are you speaking for? Who's the we? Who is it? Is it just you? Say that.
like that. That's what we're targeting. We're targeting books that contain BDSM.
What book contains BDSM? Do you even know what BDSM is? You don't even understand what definitions are of certain terms, so I have doubts. Of course I don't want BDSM in a book available for kids. Oh my god. Like, I feel like we're living on different planets.
That contain BDSM. And even actually, let's just add on in there, suicidal ideation, glorifying bulimia.
Okay, I assume she's talking about Ellen Hopkins' books. You would have to actually prove, though. You can't just say this makes me uncomfortable and therefore it's glorification. You actually have to prove that it is glorification, and that would be the standard by which we would prove that would be kids are reading this and then are going on to, as a direct causal result, doing these things. Now, as somebody who is a person who struggles with ED, which is lifelong, I can tell you that that did not come from reading any fucking book. And it didn't get better by reading any books either, because I didn't have access to books that had these conversations about, shit, this is leading me into a really dark place where I'm in trouble and I need help. My friend Ashley is a mother and also a librarian, and this is what she had to say about Ellen Hopkins' books and your insistence that they need to be banned from kids. I'm going to take it from somebody who actually has an education in library sciences over somebody who doesn't even cite a single statistic.
That's also what we're fighting against. So don't listen to the propaganda just because they say it over and over and over. In fact, That's the definition of propaganda. You repeat the same thing and people eventually just believe it because they've heard it so many times. How can it not be?
That's not the definition of propaganda. The definition of propaganda is something along the lines of using misleading information in order to sway somebody to a particular belief system. The definition of propaganda is not something said over and over again. If it were, then every sermon you've ever heard at your church over in Lithia is in fact propaganda, right? That's not true. Propaganda is misleading information intended to sway. You're confusing propaganda with how propaganda is disseminated. That's a little different. It concerns me that somebody who is this adamant about having control over the school system my kids are in doesn't understand the difference between definitions of terms and how things are carried out.
It's not true. Think critically and actually look at what's happening around you and don't believe the lies, don't believe the propaganda. It's just not true.
That's the end of the video. That's interesting. See, if I were on her side, what I would try to do is I would try to look for evidence. Think critically. Thinking critically is just watching your video and taking your word for it. Some weird bottle blonde on the internet who can't apply mascara is gonna tell me to think critically but not provide me with any evidence to back her claim? I don't fucking think so. What am I, back in Fundyland? No. Listen, if you want to prove something, you have to bring evidence to the table. And not just the information that you got that confirms your bias, but like actual statistical analysis that has been done over decades that takes into account like things like causal relationships versus just like coincidental relationships, as well as varying factors that might affect the outcome. What's so funny to me is this woman is exactly like my mother, and my mother put me in schools, assumedly, Julie probably has her younger kids in the same kind of schools I went to, where they don't teach critical thinking. They teach you ahistorical nonsense. They teach you that slavery was a good thing. They teach you that dinosaurs lived at the same times as humans, and they teach you a lot of racist shit that ignores and erases the history of a lot of different folks, but one such example is Native American. This is very ironic to hear from somebody who likely supports and possibly has bought a Becca curriculum in one way or another. I mean, we've all technically bought it because our tax dollars here in Florida, which Julie loves to talk about, pay for voucher programs so that kids, probably kids like her friends, get on voucher programs to go to private schools, and then they learn actual propaganda, which is stuff that is not rooted in fact. See here. Stuff that is not the correct definition of words at all. See here. And just flat out racism and incorrect opinions given out by Rebecca Horton originally, who created a Becca curriculum here in Florida. So it's interesting. It just feels like a constant cycle of irony and bullshit. All right, let's listen to another one, shall we?
Good afternoon. Well, it is Banned Books Week in America, and guess what that means? That means that all the books that have supposedly been banned are featured prominently on bookshelves for anyone to purchase, for anyone to check out of any library, basically.
She's already been told this and does not care, because if you look in her sunglasses here, you can see her enormous fucking house. This woman wants for nothing. The people that really suffer when books get removed, and book removing is not just the inability to buy it at a private place, but public places, so public libraries and public school libraries. And the people that are going to suffer the most from this are people who do not have the means to buy books, but also do not have the means to access getting to public libraries. So it just okay, I guess let's just shit on the people without means who can't access this stuff because you're uncomfortable.
We still have genderqueer, we still have This Book is Gay in our school libraries here in Hillsborough County. It's absurd.
Yeah, because they only banned it from middle schools and you want it banned from high schools too. I'm still looking for the causal evidence that proves that This Book is Gay causes harm to kids. I'm still waiting for that. I'm gonna have to keep waiting, aren't I?
To suggest that books have been banned anywhere, because the most prominently challenged books are still available everywhere. So please be a critical thinker and recognize that this is propaganda designed to silence you and to make you fall in line with the progressive left that want to sexualize your children.
I am literally sitting here, a parent who is, you could call me progressive, you could certainly call me a leftist. I'm sure you don't know the difference between a leftist and a liberal, so you'll probably use them interchangeably. I'm sitting here having been Jesus Christ. You know what? I wasn't going to do this today, but now I'm getting upset.
Hi, I have prepared a statement because the entire portion of this video that's supposed to be right here, I had to cut out because I had a little bit of an anxiety attack here. So trigger warning for sexual assault. I'm going to explain why I cut this part of the video out, and then I'm going to read a prepared statement so that I don't cry and have another anxiety attack. I'm a survivor of sexual assault, I should say, which I know I don't like when other people police my language about stuff that happened to me, but call it what you want. That happened to me when I was a minor, and because of that, I don't do very well when I am told that I am the predator, because I know very well what happened to me and why. And I know that I go about my life and my parenting and my advocacy in a way that comes from a place of trying to prevent what happened to me from happening to others. So instead of having you watch what is a tremendous anxiety attack on screen, I'm going to read a prepared statement. Julie Gebhards says consent is an adult issue, not an 11 and 12-year-old issue. Anyone who suggests teaching consent to 11 or 12-year-olds has failed their responsibility as an adult or is morally deficient. The language of consent opens up the slippery slope that leads to pedophilia. As a former student of Florida, as a victim of grooming and rape, I am appalled at this because the opposite is true. I was a teenager in high school when my nearly 30-year-old boss groomed me for months before he raped me. My rapist walks a free man right now in Pinellas County, which is the county directly next to me. And I know good and well that my absolute lack of sex education and learning about things like consent is part of how he knew to target me in the first place. Consent does not mean saying yes to sex. Consent is teaching boundaries, and that a child's autonomy matters. It teaches them to identify and say no to unsafe situations. Julie not only speaks over us victims of grooming and rape at our own children's school board as well as online, but her words are against what professionals know prevent sexual assault of children. And I, for one, and as one of those, have grown weary of listening to her spew dangerous rhetoric. I have said before, and I'll say again, I have to be the parent that I wish that my parents would have been for me. I've talked here about how my evangelical parents banned sex ed, and my Christian schools and my public schools here in Florida never taught it. And like every groomer before him, my rapist banked on that and looked for an uneducated girl like me who was poor and who had an alcoholic father, and my rapist saw prey because groomers always target uneducated kids with unmet needs. That is the language of pedophiles. My rapist didn't offer me books or sex ed. He offered me rides home and a place to stay and money, offered to protect me from customers who were being misogynistic or violent towards me, a 17-year-old. And he did this all for a purpose until he started taking more than he gave. He never would have wanted me to be educated on consent or sex ed, because then I would have had the tools to identify how unsafe he was. Unfortunately, by the time I realized it, it was too late. Now people like Julie cause the same to happen to girls who were just like me, thanks to her advocating for policy that bans sex education, including on consent. Lack of sex education, including on consent, not only is proven to lead to more kids engaging in sex earlier and higher rates of teen pregnancy and STDs because uneducated people make uninformed choices, but it also has a direct causal relationship with more sexual assault, including in childhood. The reason schools need to teach this is because statistically, most children are sexually abused by an adult within their own family or within family friends. And thanks to people like Julie, we will continue to fail to bridge that gap. My greatest wish is that people like Julie would start listening to us actual victims and making and advocating for evidence-based policy to prevent what happened to me from happening to other children. In the meantime, I have to protect my kids from people like Julie and anyone else who doesn't want to teach preventative education that prevents harm. And that's very scary, to have to go up to a school board and beg for evidence-based education against a person who says the opposite of what evidence says, and then likens actual survivors to the people who preyed upon us.
Okay, I'm all right. When we talk about how to prevent kids from becoming prey to actual predators, we listen to survivors, which includes me, and we apply what we know statistically, which is that kids who are in vulnerable positions, so poor kids, queer kids, kids who have been ostracized by their family for one reason or another, are more likely to be targeted because predators see vulnerability, especially for kids who are living in poverty like I was. and they see an opportunity to fill a gap, to meet a need, and then use that to their own advantage. And that is what happened to me. And the guy who did that to me is still walking around Pinellas County, and I think every day about how I failed the next girl. And I think every day about if I had just had access to resources, what that could have meant for me. I could have been able to identify that he was not safe before it was too late. So now I'm not trying to sexualize kids. I have kids. I love my kids, and I don't want them to end up like I did. I don't want their friends to end up like me. I want them to be able to identify unsafe people early on. And that's why I have conversations with my kids about things like consent and unsafe people. I'm aided in that when my school board allows my kids to check out books, because sometimes my kids aren't going to want to talk to me about certain stuff, so they're going to try to go for literature or another trusted adult. I'm trying to make a safe community entirely for my kids so that my kids and others like them don't end up like me and like my friends. Resources could have prevented what happened to me, so I reject that. I was not going to do that. I wasn't going to do this today. I really was going to try to rein it in, but she said the thing, it's an added layer of harm. It's another violation. It's re-traumatizing to me to be told that I am like the person who did that to me.
This week affords them another opportunity to do just that and to feature prominently those books like Genderqueer and This Book is Gay, and Ellen Hopkins books which feature all sorts of BDSM, incest, rape, cutting and suicidal ideation and things like that as well. But this week gives them a perfect opportunity to push more of this onto our children.
Our children, as if we don't have children. It's always about erasing me. It's always about erasing me. I exist. She knows I exist. I've talked at her for months now. She knows I exist. She knows that other parents like me exist. We are all sitting here telling her, you constantly moan on and on about parental rights and education while you step on mine. You step on mine and you erase me both as a parent and as an actual SA survivor. You erase me because it's very inconvenient for you that I exist.
So please be aware, think critically, and recognize that just because they say banned books doesn't mean anything, because the books are everywhere. It's a lie, it's a hoax, it's propaganda.
Book banning, a form of censorship, occurs when private individuals, government officials, or organizations remove books from libraries, school reading lists, or bookstore shelves because they object to their content, ideas, or themes. You don't just get to change definitions just because it's more convenient for you.
Doesn't mean anything.
It does. It does to the kids who can't access it anymore, but you don't care about them because your big ass fancy house, you don't have to think about them while you're living there over in fucking Lithia. Are you serious?
Because the books are everywhere. It's a lie, it's a hoax, it's propaganda.
All those kids in the middle schools who cannot access This Book is Gay because of you, that's a hoax. They cannot get to that book. They have been unable to reach that book because you did what you did. And you wanted that. Just because you don't like but the term fits the definition, which is what you're doing, book banning, does not mean that you get to change that definition. You did book ban. You did. I mean, that's why you used to have an Instagram titled Ban Explicit Books in Schools. And then you changed it to No Explicit Books in Schools. And now you're what Julianne speaks. You do ban books, and you know that the ones who are most in need among you, I guess not among you over in Lithia, the ones who are most in need, who can't access the library and have no other place to go but the school library, you know that now you have made it impossible for them to access that book, and you're proud of that. So just say that.
Good afternoon. Well, like I said, I had 2 conversations yesterday with media specialists right here in Hillsborough County. One about This Book is Gay and one about Genderqueer. Both of
Alright, so yeah, I found out thanks to a FOIA request, which, yeah, you should have known that was coming, that you've been driving around to books or to schools talking about different media specialist books. Now, let me just say that, again, as the person who you have essentially likened to a predator despite being an actual sexual assault victim, if I found out that you somehow, which you can't access my kid's school, if I found out that you did, if I found out that you emailed my kid's media specialist, okay. You cannot step on other parents' toes. What is it, 20 schools that you've been to now? You cannot step on other parents' toes just because you're uncomfortable with certain books. You got 20 kids? You got 20 kids in different schools? You're trying to remove access. Removing access is book banning. You don't have 20 kids. You have 6, right? And some of your kids are in college now. Assumedly, at least one of your kids is in private school. One of your kids is definitely in a Christian college. Let's be so serious. You don't have enough kids to be driving around to all these schools in Hillsborough County testimony speaking over the parents. You don't have the right to speak over sexual assault victims and tell us that we are the predators when we are trying to use evidence-based methods in order to prevent further sexual assault of kids. This is what you're doing. You are exactly why Banned Books Week exists. Actually, you know what you really are? There's a man who was around in the 1800s. His name was Anthony Comstock, and Anthony Comstock was exactly like you. There's books about him now. He's not a well-known historical figure, though. I only know about him now because, again, I went to private Christian schools. I'm sure the ones that you support. I had to teach myself history after I left because of Becca's bullshit propaganda. But I learned about Anthony Comstock. Anthony Comstock went to the Supreme Court and said, I think I should be made a special investigator for the U.S. Postal Service, because he believed that people did not have the right to send certain things through the Postal Service. Anything like smut and certain medications. He believed that that should be illegal. So he would set up essentially sting operations to catch people doing that. And he is responsible for, I believe, at least 3 suicides and countless harm from other people, for other people. You are that. He would never have seen it that way, but he did an untold amount of damage because he felt he had the right to police what everybody else was doing. You are a modern day Anthony Comstock, and that's not something to be proud of. Banned Books Week exists because people have been standing up against people like you and against people like Anthony Comstock for a long ass time, and we're going to keep standing up, and we're going to keep pointing out the fact that we have kids too, and you don't speak for us. We are SA survivors, and you in your big ass house over in Lithia, you don't speak for us because you don't know. You don't know. I want to kind of wrap this up by saying a few things. First of all, this book is gay. It has like 8 chapters, and one of them is about sex. It is not, it's not prescribing anything, it's describing. So it's answering questions that kids already have, but that is one chapter. And the reason that it's one chapter is it's because it's telling kids necessary information about all kinds of other shit that they have questions on, not just sex. And sure, it's awkward to have a conversation with kids about sex, but they want to know. And if they don't have access to a resource like this, where are they going to go? To the internet and look up porn, just like the rest of our generation did. And then we get these incorrect ideas about what sex is supposed to look like and what happens during sex. I mean, sex education is preventative. Sex education prevents us from having more STDs, more unplanned pregnancies. And Florida is an incredibly high state for teen pregnancy, which is awful. We don't want that. We don't want that. The thing about this book is, and you know what's funny about this book? I don't even like it that much. Like, it's fine. It's 10 years old at this point. It's outdated. And instead of having the conversation of what book is best that we can get the safety information that's prevalent in this book and the answered questions in this book, how can we get this in a place where kids can access it if they have questions and they need answers and they need to learn how to keep themselves safe? What book can we have? If not this one, then what? Because let me tell you what, the thing that I read last night and I wanted to highlight was that we are not teaching kids preventative safety measures, which if that had been taught again to me, I would have had better outcomes, and so many of us would have had better outcomes. Like, take for instance chapter 5, the fear. This is an entire chapter about homophobia, transphobia, where you might experience that. And then the next chapter, chapter 6, is similar, where it talks about like entire places where you might encounter people who hate you if you are a queer person, which is objectively a true thing. Like, you might, and how to keep yourself safe through that. I got into it with somebody on TikTok who was like, that book shouldn't be in schools. And I was like, well, I mean, we do need books that teach about safety to kids though, right? And they're like, that book doesn't teach about safety. I'm like, this book, let me read to you the excerpt that I read, because the entire book is about safety. When they rip those pieces about how to get on like dating apps, they ignore the incredibly important context that before they say any of that, it says in the book that there is a debate over the safety of those apps. Now, just like there's a debate over the safety of whether or not we should even drive cars because car accidents are a leading cause of death, there are people who are for it and people who are against it, but car deaths are happening all the same, yes? So you know, we can have that debate, but here's the information, we give it to kids, and then they make wise decisions using the all the information presented to them, hopefully, right? So it has an entire part of this chapter 5, talking about the fear of living as a queer person, the fear of existing and traveling as a queer person, and it talks about what to do if you're being bullied. It recommends you keep a journal. It says you're protected by law, but here's what you can do further to try to keep yourself safe. And every chapter has excerpts from a personal story from another queer person. So does the part about sex apps, and it also says very explicitly that they are for people over the age of 18. And it explains if a person doesn't have a picture on their profile, you should avoid them because that's possibly dangerous. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. Meet in public if you're going to meet people. Why? Because all of these things have previously and historically been shown to lead to dangerous situations. And there are people in here, because it does present both sides of the argument, that say, I think that Grindr and stuff like that, it says, Mika 23, who is against Grindr and other sex apps, I don't believe there are any advantages to these apps. I believe they're unsafe. So it presents this not as a telling kids what to think, let alone do, but in order to present the information that here's what adults are saying about this if you're curious, which is sort of a thing that we do about a lot of things. We teach kids all the time about stuff adults are doing that they can't do, like, I don't know, skydiving, having a job, paying taxes, like all kinds of shit we explain to kids in a way that they understand, but also in a way that we're saying, don't do this until you're older. And unfortunately, some kids are still going to do it. And I would rather them have all of the factual information about the dangers and the risks if they're going to make those decisions, because statistically, kids are going to make not great decisions. I would rather them be armed with knowledge so that they make less unsafe decisions, because I know that I was armed with no knowledge and made really unsafe decisions. I feel like we should be able to agree that we should use statistical analysis to try to figure out what's best for kids in order to prevent harm and promote safety. But instead, we can't even agree that they should have access to safety information. Like, how are we not in agreement that we should arm kids with knowledge, at least? How are we not in agreement that we should use statistical proof of what works in order to prevent harm and promote safety? How are we not in agreement about that? How are we even in the debate that your discomfort is somehow the metric by which we should choose what other people's kids have access and don't have access to? And removing access is in fact book banning. Here's some actual statistics for book banning.
Shout out to Pen America and also Mandy Patinkin. This is the second time that I have referenced The Princess Bride in one video. Hell yeah. Okay, so shout out to Pen America, who has been documenting the attempted censorship of books for a long ass time. So 1,400 bans in the United States, or in the state of Florida in the United States. We are over double that of the state of Texas, and I just want you to think about how large Texas is in comparison to Florida. One county here in Florida, Clay County, has more bans than the entire state of Missouri, Utah, Pennsylvania. So just to give you some context about how bad the censorship is here in Florida in particular. 75% of the books banned are young adult books, middle grade books, chapter books, or picture books, books specifically written and selected for younger audiences. 48% of the books banned deal with violence or physical abuse, and it is well known that when we teach kids how to identify what abuse is, they are more likely to reach out to a trusted adult to report it. 30% of the books banned include characters of color and themes of race and racism. 30% of the books banned represent LGBTQ plus identities. Unsurprisingly, Julie would probably not agree with that. Unfortunately, it's a bad look to disagree with facts. So 81% of school districts that have banned a book have a chapter or local affiliate nearby of one or more of the three most prominent national groups pushing for book bans: Moms for Liberty, Citizens for Defending Freedom, and Parents' Rights in Education, which is a misnomer because they don't care about my parental rights. They only care about the rights of parents who agree with them, which is not me. So this is just a small view of what's happening. It's a lot broader than that. Also, it's very hard to document book banning because there's no like national government agency that is monitoring this. People have to find out this information by getting it from public librarians, school librarians. So it's underreported. So just keep that in mind.
For everybody else who's here, I want to give some recommendations for banned books. So I don't know where my copy of Tango Makes Three is, but that's another book that faced challenges. And in fact, the author, I believe, got into a lawsuit against the state of Florida for the book banning, by the way. Here's some books I recommend for kids that I read to my kids that have been banned and challenged. All Are Welcome Here by Alexandra Penfold and Suzanne Kaufman. The ABCs of Black History by Rio Cortez, and the illustrations are by Lauren Semmer. This again is one of my favorites because it not only does it talk about like, you know, Martin Luther King and Mae Jemison, but it talks about people like Angela Davis, who is my all-time hero. Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo. Let's all not forget how fucking funny John Oliver is. Funny enough, I was actually contacted by the producers of Last Week Tonight by John Oliver. You might have seen me mention this if we are friends on TikTok, because they were going to use a piece of my video where I talk about growing up as a kid using a Becca curriculum. They are still doing that episode, but they had to edit me out for the sake of time. But it was really cool to talk about the overlap of Christo-fascist propaganda curriculum in particular, and the overlap of that with Moms for Liberty Today. That was really cool. Even though I'm not in the video, I think they're gonna add me to like the credits at the end or something. I don't know, but it was really cool to get contacted about that. This was created by Last Week Tonight, and this is about a bunny who falls in love with another bunny, and it's funny. And then some young adult books. Hi, buddy. Why do you have your shoes on?
Because I was on the porch.
Okay. By the way, don't show my kids on the internet. And Julie, if you're still watching, you should, no shit, you should really tell your daughter that she should take her high school out of her Instagram profile, because internet safety for kids is kind of a big fucking deal. Like, we should at least be able to agree on that. Do you like the ABCs of Black History? Me too. Do you like Marlon Bundo? Yeah. Remember when they said, "You are not in charge"? Yeah.
Would you show everybody this book?
Yes, I did. I showed them the ABCs of Black History. Thank you. I appreciate you.
This one.
This one? All Are Welcome Here? Yeah, we like that one too. It's a good book, right? Love you.
Me too.
Some YA books that I recommend. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Leah Johnson's You Should See Me in a Crown, which is fiction. All Boys Aren't Blue is nonfiction. Some that got recommended at the event last night were Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez, which I do not understand that book being banned at all. One that I've read 50% of just to get to the part where the, you know, fundies and the fascists get mad about it is Genderqueer, which I just don't really like. It shows some butts, big deal. I don't who fucking cares? That one's pretty good. It's a memoir told in graphic novel format. Let's see, what else, what other books do I read? Bell Hooks and Angela Davis are banned from higher education essentially because, well, we can talk about that in a different video, but always read Bell Hooks and Angela Davis. They are much smarter than the people who are unable to agree on what the term banning books means. And of course, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize winner Toni Morrison. You know, read banned books all year long. If you have the means, please access them for your kids. And if you have the means but know that your community struggles to get access to books that they want to read, please bridge that gap in your community, because there are people like who we've talked about today who actively go out of their way to try to limit access and then pretend that they're not doing that. So please make it so that other people have access to the books that they would like to read. Please foster conversation that actually cares about critical thinking, including, you know, nuance. And please support things like Florida Freedom to Read Project, PEN America, do your part, and also learn what words mean. And have the day you deserve. Okay? Bye. Thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons. And those are Alexander, Allie Magpie, Ambihextress, Andy, Cammy, Chris, Claire, Des Roberts, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron, Eric, Farror, Harley, Jack and Jill, John E, Casey McKenzie, Kaleno K, Caitlin M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lex, Alice, Peggy, Rain, Reese, Samar, Shiny, Scarlett, and SMK. Thank you all so much for
for being a friend. And before I go out to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are AM Angel, Alicia, Amanda, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley, Ava, BB, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Brainrot, Bree, Brian, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Cassandra, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deborah, Diet Goth, Dorothea, Ebby, Ember, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra, Hannah C, Hannah T, Harpy Kuro, Haley, Hello There Darling, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, JT, Jen Michelle, Jenny G, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Just Pugsley, Kaylee, Kat, Katie, Katya, Kayala, Kendra, Kylie, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura, Library of Scars, Lisa B, LP, Lou Siri, Luna Moth, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Marcella, Marquita, Maz, Malara, MK Books, Molly, James, Nat, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pixel Stars, Puratheon, Rachel B, Rat Sarah, Reba, Rebecca, Ren, Robin, Rosie, Rowan, Other Rowan, Sequoia, Sadie, Samantha, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Shayna, Sheena, Sean, Sophie, Stephanie, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tina, Toast, Trashcan Teddy, Sev, Valentine, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.